In this lesson, we're going to look at comparing and locating fractions. So how can I write fractions in simplest form? Fractions are in simplest form when they cannot be reduced any further. So if I look at the number 2/8, the number 2 can go into the numerator, and the number 2 can also go into the denominator. It can be divided. So if I divided the top by 2 and I divided the bottom by 2, because whatever I do on the top I have to do on the bottom, I end up with a fraction of 1/4, because 2 divided by 2 is 1, and 8 divided by 2 is 4. So let's take a look at -9 all over 72. Well, right away I'm going to know that my answer is going to remain a negative. So I'm just going to put my negative sign right there. So let's take a look at 9 and 72. Well, the number 9 can go into 9 one time, and the number 9 can go into 72 8 times. So when I simplify that then, 9 divided by 9 is equal to 1, and 72 divided by 9 is equal to 8. So my answer here is going to be -1/8. Let's write our 16 all over 20 down here. Alright, so is there a number that can go into 16 that can also go into 20? And that is 4. So I'm going to divide the top by 4 and the bottom by 4. And I'm going to end up with 4 all over 5. And there isn't a number that can go into 4 that can also go into 5, so then we know that it's going to be in simplest form. Alright, so how can I identify equivalent fractions? Well, two fractions are equivalent if they are equal in simplest form. So I take a look at 7/10. Well, 7/10 cannot be simplified any further, but let's look at 14 all over 20. Well, I can divide 14 by 2 and I can divide 20 by 2, and I'm going to end up with 7 all over 10. And so looking at the two fractions, in simplest form, they are equivalent, so the answer to that is yes. Our next one, 21/28, I can divide the top by 7 and I can divide the bottom by 7, giving me 3 all over 4. Well, 3/4 is not equal to 1/3, so the answer to if those are equivalent, the answer is no. So let's look at the next pair, 30/75. Well, let's divide the top by 5 and let's divide the bottom by 5, and I'm going to have 6 all over 15. Well, I'm not quite done there because 6/15 can be simplified further, because the number 3 can go into 6 and 3 can also go into 15, giving me 2/5. Alright, so I'm going to just circle that so we don't get mixed up with those. So let's take a look at 75 all over 105. Well, we're going to divide that one. Let's just start with 5. So 75 divided by 5 is 15, and then we're going to take 105 divided by 5, and we're going to get 21. Well, here again, these two can be simplified further because 3 can go into 15 and 3 can go into 21. So I'll divide this by 3 and divide this by 3. And I'm going to end up with 5 all over 7. So is 2/5 equal to 5/7? And the answer to that one is no, so they are not equivalent. Example 3, how can I compare fractions without a calculator? In order to compare fractions without a calculator, you're going to need to have common denominator. So let's take a look at number 1. I've got 2/3 compared to 5/8. So I'm going to look for a common denominator so that I can compare them. And the number 3 and 8 can both go into 24. So that's my common denominator. So I take 3 and I'm going to multiply by 8 times 8. Whatever I do on the bottom, I have to do on the top. So I'm going to have 16 all over 24. And now I multiply 8 by 3 and 15 by 3. I'm sorry, 5 by 3, and I'm going to get 15. And so now when you've got a common denominator, you're able to tell which one's going to be less than, greater than, or equal to. And in this case, 16 all over 24 is greater than 15 all over 24. Alright, so let's take a look at the next one. Let's look for a common denominator, and we know that 4 and 20 can both go into 20, so we're going to write that as our denominator. So I multiplied 4 times 5. So if I did that on the bottom, I have to do that on the top. So I times this by 5, so I times this by 5, and I'm going to get 10. And I don't have to do anything with my next one. I'll be left with 15 all over 20. So now let's take a look, and I'm going to 10 twentieths is going to be less than 15 twentieths. All right, and our last one. Let's take a look here. I think what I'm going to do, because I've got a mixed fraction and then I've got an improper fraction, I think I'm going to take my mixed fraction. It doesn't matter what you do, but you should be comparing like ones. So if I take and I turn my 1 4/5 into an improper fraction, I'm going to have 1 times 5 is 5, 5 plus 4 is 9. So I've got 9 all over 5 is my improper fraction. So now let's take a look. I need a number that 5 and 12 can both go into. So I'm just going to multiply 5 times 12 to get that, and that number is going to be 60. So 5 can go into 60 and 12 can go into 60. So I'm going to multiply this by 12 and this by 12. This is whatever you do on the bottom, you have to do on the top. And I'm going to get 108. And then this one I'm going to multiply by 5. So 21 times 5. And we're going to end up with 105. All right, so which one is greater? 108 all over 60 is greater than 105 all over 60. So there you have it. So when you're comparing fractions without a calculator, you're going to want to have a common denominator. All right, this next example, we're going to find out how you can write equivalent fractions. Well, let's write 2 equivalent fractions for each one of these. Well, first of all, I know that I can simplify 8 all over 16 by dividing the top number by 2 and dividing the bottom number by 2. And so equivalent fraction is going to be 4 all over 8. So another way I could also simplify that even further, I could have divided the top. I could have divided the top by 8 and 8, right? And I could have ended up with a fraction of 1 all over 2. That's an equivalent fraction. You don't always have to divide, though, to get an equivalent fraction. I could multiply. So let's say I decided to multiply. Let's just get rid of this. Let's say that I decided to multiply both those, the numerator and the denominator. Let's say I decided to multiply by 4, okay? Because whatever you do on the top, you have to do on the bottom, and then it will be an equivalent fraction. So 4 times 8 is going to be 32. And then 16 times 4, you're going to end up with 64. So I know I just made 3 of them, but wanted to make sure that you understood that you could also multiply them. All right, let's look at 9/15. Well, that one I know I can simplify, so let's just start there. I'll divide the top by 3 and the bottom by 3. I'll end up with 3 all over 5, so that's 1. And 3/5 can't be simplified anymore, so let's just pick any number. Whatever you do on the top, you have to do on the bottom. Let's just say that I want to multiply the fraction by, let's take 5 this time, times 5. So 9 times 5 is going to be 45. And then 15 times 5 is going to give you 75. And so there's another equivalent fraction. So to find equivalent fractions, you can either multiply the top by the same number as you multiply on the bottom, or you can divide the same number on the top and on the bottom to get those equivalent fractions. All right, in our last example, how can I locate fractions on a number line? So at which point is 7/8 located? Well, you have to take a look at what units are breaking up your number line first. And if you take a look at the first number line there, it is broken up by just 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Well, we know that 7/8 is going to be less than 1. So our answer there for the one for point right here, less than 1, the only point that's less than 1 is letter A. So the answer to that one's going to be A. So let's locate the point 3 1/8. Well, 3 1/8 is going to be between 3 and 4. So our answer to that one is going to be point C. Now let's take a look at the second number line. At which point is negative 4 1/5 located? So first of all, each one of these is broken up by ones, or so we've got -1, then we've got -2, -3, -4, and -5. All right, so negative 4 1/5. Well, it's more negative than 4, but it's going to be between -4 and -5, so you have to be careful there. So it's going to be located right here, because here's -4 is right here. Oops, can you see there? And then we need to go a little bit further negative, so we are at point J. And now which point is 4 1/5 located at? Well, that's a positive number. So you're going to go up 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, but it's between 4 and 5, positive 4 and 5. So point 4/5 is going to be located at point L. So in this lesson, we looked at simplifying fractions, we looked at finding equivalent fractions, and we also looked at how to locate numbers on a number line.